Okay. Welcome everybody to our next session in the medical track. We'd like to welcome Ron Sparkman, Jeff Pernell, and Bill Hargenrader. And it's going to be a great follow-on to the last discussion because they're going to talk about how to choose what we grow on Mars.
All right. Everybody hear me? All right. Excellent. Welcome to Healthy Eating on Mars, a stepwise, localized approach to whole foods. We worked very, very hard on getting that SLAW acronym in there. I'm Bill Hargenrader, founder of Mars Now. We got Ron Sparkman presenting today, founder of Opportunity U. We're co-creators of I Love Mars, and we're also co-hosts for Red Planet Radio, Mars Society's podcast. We've got Jeff Pernell presenting today, founder of Galactic Farms. He's got a lot of great stuff to share with you today. Part of our team, we got Melissa Pernell, a biologist, and we have Danielle Hargenrader, who is a nutritionist. This is our team that won the Mars City Design Contest in 2016 for the agricultural category, and this is continuing our work and our research in this area. So a little bit about us, just for people out there, who's students right now? Got some students with us. Any professors, people in the academic fields? Huh? Well, okay, a couple of people. Okay, we got any what? Farmers, vertical farmers?
There's lots of farmers.
Any farmers in here? We got some farmers in here? Okay, great. So we got a pretty wide mix of people that are coming in. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So one of the differences with this approach that we have, SLAW, is a holistic logistics mindset. And we'll go into that. We'll also go into the prepackaged food experience, cost factor, nutrition factor, future Martian perspective, technology survey, and bioregenerative life support system deep dive with Jeff. So I'm going to wrap up in a Q&A. So for me, I've always been interested in Mars, but I'd say that it really became important to me. After 9/11, I joined the Army National Guard. And when I was flying to Iraq, it was about 200 pounds of gear beneath me, looking out at the night sky and just thinking if we put half the resources into going to Mars as we did war, we'd be on Mars by now. Continued a career in cybersecurity, project management, program management, and Lean Six Sigma. Anybody hear of Lean Six Sigma? Look it up, write it down, start researching. It's about taking processes, making them more efficient, more effective, and value chain analysis, looking at all the links in any logistics change and seeing where you can improve the outputs from that. So in recent years, started applying these skill sets to solving Mars problems. Last year, Ron and I co-presented on a hybrid approach Mars mission. The acronym is HAM. So we got HAM, we got SLAW. We have a little food fixation going on, but it's about collaboration, reducing risk, and reducing costs. And so SLAW, there's a lot of people going out there that are out there right now doing great research on food, Russian space food, deep space ecology. And so we're going to show you why we're just a little bit different, how we can add some value to what's already going on out there. So some factors for getting food to Mars, tying into cost: plan, prepare, package, launch, transport, land. We're still at less than 0.5% effectiveness on successful Mars missions, so it would really not be good to send a year's worth of food that doesn't make it, will mess things up. Storing, consuming, excreting. Jeff's going to talk a lot about excretion. And then repeating the process. So we're talking about the prepackaged food experience. How many people have ever had the pleasure of having an MRE? Okay, we got 4 or 5 people here. Yeah, it's basically, it's everything you need in a small package. You eat about 3 of these a day. After about 7 days, you don't want to eat anymore. Inside the package, you have delicious things like country captain chicken, meatloaf and gravy, vegetarian taco pasta. The reason I bring this up is kind of an analog to what individuals could be experiencing on Mars if you had to eat packaged food. What's interesting is about this, and this will come into play later, there's all these different items in here. And so in basic training, after having MREs every day for a few weeks, you start stockpiling the things you don't want, your sugar, your tissue. For me, it was coffee. So I would trade my M&Ms for coffee. So it was like doing little drug deals in the prison. This comes into play because, as we're going to see with the SLAW approach, it's about growing multiple types of different foods and basically encouraging a mini economy versus just a one-way food design. Like, hey, well, this food is great to be consumed. We can actually encourage a mini economy around that. Also, this is some real back-of-the-napkin math right here. But one MRE is 500 grams times 3 a day at 1,500 grams. When you start looking at what it costs to ship 1 kilogram to Mars, You can look at what it really costs now, our projections. We came up with around $150,000 per kilogram. So you're looking at, per person, that's $82 million of worth of food that's being sent. A 6-person team on year for Mars, $500 million. Now you can reduce this in certain ways by freeze-drying foods and things of that nature, but this is really where cost comes into play. If $500 million potentially is going to be spent on the mission, let's spend that instead on actually developing food that can be grown locally. And so you start, when you think about things in this way, you start looking at the things you eat and how much that would cost. So today, I purchased this for me and some of my team, 800 grams, $24, or on Mars, $120,000. So things start looking really expensive. And like Gatorade says, every ounce counts. So the holistic approach essentially is tying in not just engineering, not just the science of biology or botany, but let's look at health, wellness, social wellness, things of that nature. So health is sometimes defined as the absence of disease. Well, a better definition is not just an absence of disease, but a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely absence of disease. Wellness, UC Davis, wellness is an active process of becoming aware of and making choices toward a healthy and fulfilling life. There's massive health benefits to eating whole foods. You know, go see Super Size Me if you think eating junk food all the time is going to be a good thing. But the point being is, by looking at starting with the end in mind, not just, hey, I'm growing this potato, or hey, I'm growing this food item. It's like, why are you growing that? So, I mean, you could be a vegan if all you eat is Oreos. It's not necessarily healthy. So what we ended up doing is building a healthy Martian meal plan. So my wife is a nutritionist, and so we basically brought out for 2,500 calories, a macro breakdown of 55% carbs, 20% protein, 25% fat, all with a vegetarian diet that can be grown locally on Mars. And we came up with a meal plan. So for breakfast, a sweet potato tempeh hash, sauteed spinach, cantaloupe. For lunch, a black bean and brown rice recipe, kale and garlic, baked potato, num-nums, tofu, coriander, cilantro, and sea salt. Now the herbs are really important, as Melissa has pointed out before, because it really brings, you know, some spice and some pizzazz and some fun to your foods. And so we can, if anyone wants these slides later for time concerns, I'm gonna move through them. Let me know and I'll send them to you. But for snacks, who doesn't love hummus? Chia seeds are great. But the whole point is that from all those different food items, it really comes down to about these 30 or so items that can be grown. And when you start looking at what are some things that make people happy, like oranges and the good fats we have in our diets, avocados and almonds and coconuts, we realize that they take longer than a year to grow. Some coconuts can take 7 years to bear fruit. And so essentially you start looking at not just what we're going to eat now, but what we're going to eat 7 years from now, and how can we plan on that. Let's not forget the locally grown necessities such as coffee and tea for those that enjoy tea. So what about meat? Where are my carnivores? Where are my meat eaters? Did you raise your hand? Okay, all right. Any vegetarians? Okay, any vegans? Okay, well, you would do well on Mars. Because there's not a whole lot of research, but there is actually some research coming to light. I wish there was more in this area. They did basically a survey of traditional staple crops, wheat, potatoes, rice, and they assigned them a value of what resources, energy, and water went into them. We'll talk about essentially traditional farming versus vertical farming, some more tech that'll get that efficiency down even to an even greater number. But we're looking at like eggs and poultry and pork is 4 times the energy expenditure, and beef is 10 times that. So it's 400 times more energy intensive, resource intensive to have a beef patty than it is to go and have a potato. It's really important to keep in mind, especially on Mars where the energy input is going to be really, you have to measure that down to a very small percentage. So considerations, this opens up doors to more study on growing patterns and timing of various fruits and vegetables. So not just looking at one food or even a couple of foods, but also looking at a time horizon. What's great about that is you don't just start looking at Mars as a one-time mission, you look at Mars as a colonization operation that's going to be there for the long haul. So next steps are part of what we're doing, planning out systems, power, resources, and a computer simulation that we're putting together. And now we're on to the future Martian perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. All right. So I don't know how I'm actually going to be able to follow that because Bill's an amazing speaker, but I will try my best. So I personally actually want to go to Mars. I've been fascinated by everything that Elon Musk has been doing. I know that there's some people in the room, that guy in particular, who is very much involved in the idea of going Mars One. Elon Musk, a lot of these people have got us all interested in actually going to Mars. And what he told us last year during IAC was that anybody will be able to go. Well, I'm not your typical person that would probably be, what you would think as an astronaut. Kind of a big guy, been there and done that. It's just I'm a little bit older. I'm starting my schooling later in life. I'm a year into my degree, and I'm 36 years old. So I've got 10 years for my PhD. So I'm going to be in my mid-40s. By the time I have the ability to go, I'll probably be 50, 55 years old. But he said a light amount of training would be all you would need to be able to go, as long as you have the $250,000 to take the trip. But as you guys can probably tell, but I mean, it's selling your house and generally selling your earthly possessions to be able to get up and go. I'm down with that. I'm completely fine with selling everything I own and going to Mars. But how am I going to eat on Mars? As you guys can probably tell, I like to eat. So I want to know how and why, what we're going to do, how we're going to get this done. What does it mean to live on Mars for an average person like me? What new technologies are we going to be able to utilize once we get there? And how can I be involved? And that's kind of where I end up working out with these great guys here. So NASA has a current plan. They want to actually pre-position prepackaged foods on the planet. So there's a lot of ideas that they already have in place. They have food scientists, a lot of people working on this right now, and we can kind of see that on the International Space Station with a year in space. A lot of the foods that they eat, you'd be surprised at things that go up, sushi, foods that they love. And there's a very specific reason for that. The astronauts will stop eating if they don't have enough food variety. They call it menu fatigue, that they will just give up eating altogether. And that to me is terrifying. Like, I need to lose some weight, but not that bad. I want to live on Mars for a long time and really see some cool stuff. So that food will be in position on Mars years in advance. But anything can happen. We all know this. Mars is hard. If you've watched the Mars series that was on Nat Geo and got as deeply depressed as I did by the end of the first episode, you were kind of wondering, what are we going to be able to do to be able to possibly fix maybe some of these problems in the meantime? And so NASA's also working on different things like the experimental food growth that they have. International Space Station used Veggie, which is a really amazing program that they use to grow food in microgravity. I'm sure everyone here knows about that. People are testing Martian simulant soil, which is something that we are interested in doing. And growing plants with urban farming, which, urban farming is a great idea to save space and to be able to grow the plants that we need, which we will get to in a bit with Jeff. So what will SpaceX's plan be? Did anybody hear Elon talk about food? Because I was paying real close attention, didn't hear anything. He said, hey, we're going to be able to grow stuff on Mars if we condense the atmosphere, I believe is the way that he put it. But it was very quick, it was in and out, and I'm sure that there will be more details. In fact, that's actually where SpaceX started. He wanted to put a greenhouse on Mars. Went to start talking to different people about getting a rocket. Everybody turned him down, and Elon is not one to take no lightly. So he decided to create SpaceX, and now we have this amazing thing that has galvanized pretty much everybody in space. He's talked about restaurants on the ITS and how interesting it's going to be. It's going to be a fun trip. He wants everybody to know how exciting it's going to be there. There'll be, ZeroG games and all these things to stay active, and you'll be able to kind of pick the foods you want. But again, how? How are they going to cook in space? How are you setting a fire in, that kind of area and creating these foods? I'm fascinated to know. Every time he puts something out, I can't wait to hear it. But I haven't heard anything yet. If I'm going to start saving $250,000, I need details. So there's a lot of emerging technologies that we have. 3D food printers are becoming a thing. This looks a little too pretty, just like every time we see a picture of a Big Mac. It doesn't really look like that when you buy one. But 3D food printing is coming along, and it's going to be something that's really going to be impressive in the future. We've got 10, 20 years to perfect these things. Will it be easier for us to take these things? I don't really know. Like freeze drying it might really kind of get into bigger numbers there that I have yet to research, but 3D food printing is going to be impressive. Lab-grown meats are becoming a thing. Now we're looking at what that really will mean for humanity, what it's going to mean for us here on Earth to be able to work on our environment and stop maybe some of the food cruelty that we all know exists. Thank you, Netflix. But it's really interesting. We're going to see this go, I believe. Where are we going to be able to grow it there, the food scientists that we take with us? Soylent, which is funny, I can't believe they picked the name after Soylent Green, but Soylent is a very real supplement that gives you, that's a real product. Right now you can buy it. And I can't believe they picked that name, but I kind of got to give them credit for marketing. That's real, and it gives you everything that you need. Now, he mentioned MREs for the people in the military a little bit ago, but maybe some of you have taken meal replacement supplements before. You drank a protein shake. The flavors aren't awful like they used to be in the 90s. Now they're kind of delicious. That's blueberries and cream. It's got blueberries in it. It's awesome. It tastes delicious, and it makes you want to drink it. It makes you want to be able to continue to use them. So if we're looking at a balanced diet, it's one of those things. But now we get into space farming, real foods, the idea of what we're going to be able to grow on Mars, which is a little bit of how we developed the idea that we have that Bill already went over. And this is Jeff and Melissa. Melissa's right here. And so they brought the prototype for their space farming, Galactic Farms, to Space Foundation, where I am a volunteer, and donated it so that way people could see it. The big Summer of Discovery event that we did all this summer was all about space gardening, space farming. They kicked it off. Jeff came down, gave a speech, inspired all the kids, and people have been asking questions about it all summer. It is now one of the very first things you walk into at the Space Foundation. I'm assuming it will be there next year whenever everybody comes for Space Symposium, so please come and check it out. So there's problems that we have to overcome. The water supply on Mars. We found a massive underground water ice that is about the size of Lake Superior, but there's a lot of things that we're having issues with. There's the perchlorates that are poisonous to human beings, especially to children. If we're talking about raising children in the long terms, it's something we're going to have to work on fixing. Nutrient deficiencies, obviously there's nothing there that grows there. There's a lot of things that the specialists in this room will be able to help us to figure out, and the impurities that we're going to see on a planet that is just foreign to us. Light and energy sources, the distance from the sun, it's vastly less, as one of the presenters here mentioned earlier. The frequent dust storms can be planetary. It's really one of those things that solar energy is not going to be something that we're going to really be looking for using. Energy requirements are going to be massive, especially if we're growing foods, and that you can see Jeff there hanging out underneath the glow lights that he uses. LED lights are going to be massive, and again, something Jeff will go over a little bit more in a minute. Radiation is going to be tough on all of us. It's also going to be tough on food, our water supplies. What are we going to do? How are we going to make sure that we keep the foods that we have growing and dealing with the harsh Martian environment, even on the inside of wherever it is that we live, whether it be 3D printed or not. And then, of course, we have the citizen sciences programs and everything that people are doing. A lot of people are in this room right now. Deep Space Ecology, Florican's part of the space certification program that I do with Space Foundation, Mars Desert Research Station, High Seas, which was actually where the Galactic Farms prototype was. So you guys got to see that a little bit. And Galactic Farms. So this is really kind of what we're looking at right now, and this is us last year and the event that Bill kind of went over a little bit. So I'm going to pass it on to Jeff and let him get into the deep details of what we've got going on. I'll never get that off. Nope, I do not. He put it on. Teamwork, baby.
All right, so I'm Jeff Pernell. I am the founder of Galactic Farms. I live in Missoula, Montana. If you've been to Montana, you know that the winters are, you can't grow. And so we really, my whole idea, really getting started with this was looking at how do we, use urban farming techniques in a way to produce food year-long and in harsh environments. So bioregenerative life support systems, basically what we've got here is a way to recycle astronaut waste and create a fertilizer system, or a fertilizer that you can then turn around and feed to the plants that you're going to feed to your astronauts. The big deal here is that your microorganisms are the most important part of that system, and they are converting raw elements into nutrients that are actually usable by the plants. Bliss inputs, that's that biological life support system. Big one is light. As you may know, photosynthesis mainly occurs in the 400 range, and in the 600s, that's where these spikes are. And so that's why when you see those LED grow lights, a lot of them are red and blue in color. we're finding out that the greens and the yellows actually do have an important part in growing plants. And so science continues to expand on that, and we're looking at what do we do in those situations, and is it better to use a full spectrum light, for instance? But there's a lot of wasted energy. Like if you had energy across the top here, there's a lot of energy that the plants aren't even using. That's why they reflect green. So under LED grow lights, again, we've got some tomato starts going. This is in my system that I've got set up in our shop. Another input is water. You really want to make sure you know where your water is coming from. On Mars, it's still questionable. Where are we going to be getting it from? There's questions: are we trying to mine it from the atmosphere, or are we pulling it, digging down and pulling it from ice reserves? We're glad that there's water there. It sounds like there's water really quite abundant in our solar system. So it's just a matter of making sure that it's pure and is not going to be killing our plants. Because if you don't have the right pH range, of course, not only might you kill your plants, but you could nutrient uptake is greatly diminished if you're not within the right range. Atmosphere. Really important in considering when you're growing in Mars, but also in any controlled environment. If you're completely in control of your environment, you've got to really take into consideration, are you providing enough oxygenation for the roots, carbon dioxide for the leaves, and of course nitrogen. And as mentioned in several of the talks I've heard on this conference, nitrogen is a key element that we're missing on Mars, so it's something that we're really going to have to evaluate what we're going to do. But there are plans. You can actually use cyanobacteria as a way to pull nitrogen from an environment and accumulate it that way, and then add that into your fertilizer source. And of course, humidity controls. Other inputs, I am racing through here. I'm thinking we're pretty low on time, but there's lots of nutrients you have to keep track of. It's not a simple just throw it in the ground and let it grow, because as we all know, the makeup of Mars is quite different from what we're seeing on this planet, and so we've got to keep an eye on those micro and macronutrients that are needed for production.
Heads up, we're going to skip Q&A because we got started a little bit late, so you can run through, and if you want to talk to us, come find us afterwards, okay?
Great. So soil building, basically one of our heroes, Morgan Irons, she's in the audience, is looking at is really looking at how do you take the resources that are on Mars and create a usable media where the plants can actually grow out of it. So if you haven't looked into what she's up to, please do, because it's pretty amazing and really important, not only for terraforming Mars, but for converting traditionally non-arable land into growable space. And their company, Deep Space Ecology, is doing some pretty cool stuff with that. Hydroponics, this is kind of where I'm into. I'm into hydroponics and bioponics. I'll talk about bio in just a minute, but the idea with hydroponics, you're really looking for a more sterile environment. Nutrients are added into your water solution. However, one of the weaknesses with this model is that most of those nutrients are coming from mining situations. Some of those nutrients, like phosphorus, for instance, extremely limited, and are actually, we're approaching like peak phosphorus if we're not already past peak phosphorus. And so that's a question of where are we going to get those nutrients, not only on Mars, but here on this planet. If you have an issue in a hydroponic solution, usually it's a big issue and it's going to crash a system because there are few buffers that soil, for instance, allows for. Bioponics, this is where microorganisms are actually part of the system. We're not looking for sterility. In fact, we're a probiotic system. We're actually encouraging microorganisms to grow. Some of you may have heard of aquaponics, which is basically aquaculture and hydroponics combined. You've got your fish are basically converting whatever they're being fed, they're masticating, they're digesting and excreting into the water. That water then is circulated through a media where your microorganisms are living, and those microorganisms take that raw nutrient, turn it into a nutrient for uptake into the plants, and then finally we can eat those plants and get that food into us. My mic. And then compost teas, a way to supplement bioponics, or actually even just use straight compost teas and avoid the higher life forms. Basically, if you guys know what a compost pile is, you create a compost pile, you get it nice and healthy, you scoop up a bit, put it in a giant tea bag, aerate some water, throw that in there, and now you've got a tea that you can actually use as a hydroponic style fertilizer for your plants. Oh wait, there's an important one in here. Prepackaged. That one, and that is that's the system that we had in at High Seas. They were going to do an Aquaponics versus Prepackaged trial, however, because of state regulations, they weren't allowed to use fish, but they grew quite a bit of vegetables with just using astronaut urine and water, and recycled it. So it's a cyclical system. There's a little bit more about what we're doing with our projects. At the University of Montana, we have a vertical system. We literally went out and caught the fish and put them in the system, and it's a vertical grow towers. These are towers provided by Bright Agrotech, which is a company out of Laramie, Washington, recently purchased by Plenty. You may have heard about that little exchange. Anyhow, the perch live in here. The water filters through a biosolids collection and then into a sump pump, and then the water is pumped up and drained down through these towers, providing all those plants with nutrients. And then the LED lights, which you can't really, they're illuminating, but you're seeing the back of them right here and here. All right. This is the ZeroG system. It stands for Zero Ground Space. This is our little design with our little astronaut here. And the idea was we see all these concepts for Mars with large domes. And so how do you take advantage of domes? You vertical farm, and you really want to preserve space. So one way to do that is actually elevate your food above your head. So when it's growing above your head, it's not taking any ground space. You drop those systems down, you harvest, you replant, and they go back up out of your way. You can keep an eye on them. The issues that we had with that, we did culinary herbs. We grew a ton of basil, like not a literal ton, but a lot. But we did have some issues. We were a little bit deficient in potassium and iron, and also we had we thought, oh, let's try strawberries. So we had strawberries in our other garden that was outside. We brought those inside. Horrible idea. Brought all kinds of pests into the system, and totally infested everything with spider mites and whiteflies and all kinds of issues. And then ergonomics. It turns out that when it was up above our head, it was a pain to harvest. I only had one system that was hooked up to a winch, so that one would raise and lower. But even that one, as it would come down, it would bend one way and go it was frustrating. The other option was a ladder, and of course you want to avoid ladders if you can, because they kill people. So I was lucky enough to be invited to participate with the High Seas project. I wouldn't go do this project, but this was the year-long mission. This was, I think, mission 4, where astronauts go to a simulation. This is an analog simulation in Hawaii. They live in a tiny little dome. And so I sent 4 systems to go be part of that. One more minute. All right, that's what that system looks like when it's broken down. This is actually how it looked when it was full of plants. This is a semi-vertical. You could call it almost a hybrid, halfway between vertical and horizontal. And I was pretty stoked when that Mars series on National Geographic actually showed it, and there's my logo. So that was it. At home, Melissa is working with the cyanobacteria project. We've also got several home projects. And lots of other stuff we could talk about later, but that's about, there is a call. We are hoping to do a citizen science project where we're collecting microbes from around the world in compost piles because, as you know, a large biodiversity in any kind of system, life system is super important. And if we've got microbes from around the planet as a way to come together, but we can give more details about that later. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks, team.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you. Melissa, stand up.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, for Melissa.
Yeah.